Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for attending today's webinar, OSHA Hazard Communication Labeling and SDS Update. My name is Kat Amato, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at Coggno. I'd like to take a moment to thank our partner community who have invited their members and clients to attend today's event. Coggno partners with many different business segments to provide online training courses directly from their website so their members and clients have a convenient place to purchase the training they need. We have thousands of courses in virtually every business topic available in our marketplace, including human resources, software, business management, and soft skills training, to name a few of the topics available. So be sure to check out our website to search for options. If you're not a Coggno partner, you can email me today at info@coggno.com, and I'll send you information on how to sign up. It's easy and completely free and earns your company revenue. Today we have with us Philip Landry, an experienced and educated H.S.E. professional with over 25 years in heavy industry, ranging from hazardous materials disposal to manufacturing within large multinational firms. Philip is the current president and owner of H.S.E. Partnering Solutions since 2012, which is dedicated to providing outsourced health, safety, and environmental management for manufacturing and industrial service firms. Since OSHA's alignment with the Global Harmonization System, GHS, Mr. Landry has been involved in training and development of processes to help companies understand the requirements OSHA has put in place to align with this international standard. So Philip's with us today to share some information about this topic. Welcome, Philip.
Hi, Kat. How are you today? And
very
happy
good,
New
Year.
Yeah, I unmuted the microphone, so I think that works, right?
Yes,
so anyway, Happy New Year to everyone. I wanted to thank Coggno and Kat specifically for helping me set up this training presentation. I'm looking forward to working with Coggno quite a bit, and I think it's kind of a great partnership. So before we get started, I wanted to do a quick disclaimer. As a H.S.E. professional, and I am a full-time health, safety, and environmental professional who does hazard communication, labeling, updating, and training for different companies, I am not a full-time hazard communication expert. There are people who actually have devised the GHS, and also people who have done work on the OSHA side to develop these standards, and who are in this game full time. So they are certainly probably the experts. And in reference, I have a group that is called the Society for Chemical Hazard Communication, or SCHC, who really is one of those companies that, or associations that really does a great job with this as a full-time career, and really can answer a lot of the technical questions regarding chemicals and GHS. So I would refer people to both OSHA and that organization should they have really great in-depth chemical questions. However, today we're going to go over a lot of the 1910, 1200 type requirements that have recently changed and that companies need to be aware of. So that's my disclaimer. The goal today for me really is to just go over those recent changes and touch base with some of the history and the information about GHS, and then show companies maybe what they should be doing or what they should have already been doing as of 2013, and then lastly to kind of highlight the generic module that we have in Coggno to train some of the employees who might still need that training. All right, so I'll get started here. let's see if I can move forward. Okay, so Haz Com remains the top 10 most frequently cited standards, and if you take a look here, 1910 1200 is the second most frequently cited standard. I can personally, say that I've been on many sites of different companies, both small and large, who really need some work and need to fine-tune the hazard communication program at their company. So while the Haz Com standard has been around for quite a bit of time, it certainly is still in need of being implemented fully. So, and this is really why the training is so important for people. So, a little bit about Haz Com and the GH Historical Timeline. You can see, as I said, GHS and Haz Com have been around for a while. You take a look at 1983. I have as a benchmark starting time, and you're talking about 2016 right now. So we're talking about the better part of 30-something years that this has been around. So it's not something new. It's just something that has evolved over time. And to give you a little bit of historical perspective, 1983 U.S. Haz Com standard created. 89, Haz communication applies to all industries. Right? UN Conference of an Environment and Development starts for the GHS. Right? That's the United Nations. Back in '92 now. And then 2003, first edition of GHS created by the UN Council on oh God, I don't have the acronym, but in 2003 they were created. So most recently, the revision of the U.S. Haz Com standard is 2012. The U.S. Haz Com standard completed, and training requirements, basic training requirements, started in 2013. And then now, by the middle of this year coming up, or that we're in now, excuse me, Haz Com standard is going to be into full implementation, and that's the Haz Com GHS aligned standard. So as you can see, there's a lot of history here. It's certainly not something that just snuck up on us. Okay. So the changes, and this is in the OSHA website regarding the implementation dates. There have been several, some of which have passed and some of which are coming. So 2013, this is the train employees on all new labeling elements and safety data sheet format, which is really what we're going to kind of be going through today, and shows you what I have as an interactive computer training module on Coggno. So it should have been done quite a while ago, but I know that there are certainly companies that are still getting up to date with that. So this would certainly help that. June 1st, 2015. So compliance with all modified provisions of the final rule, right? Most of the companies needed to come into compliance with this at that point. And then December 1st, distributor shall not ship containers labeled by the chemical manufacturer or importer unless it's a Haz Com standard compliant label. So as of this past December, all these distributors and or chemical suppliers should have switched over to the new labels. So that means that the employees will start seeing those labels, if not already, probably by the beginning of this year, which is 2016. And then lastly, June 1st, this is later in the year, we have the update alternative workplace labeling and Haz Com programs as necessary at all employers, and provide additional employee training for newly identified physical or health hazards. So because the Haz Com standard has changed, there may be new or different requirements of notifying employees what the hazards are, because they may have been changed a little, or they may have aligned differently with the new Haz Com standard. So employers need to tell their employees what they actually are being exposed to, and all types of other information that we'll go over in the future. But so this is a big deadline. It's really the full implementation of everything for employers, and I think I think maybe there was a little less focus on getting things up to speed 100% because this was a transition period. I think now that the June 1st is here, the June 1st deadline is here, I think people will certainly start to really want to get their Haz Com standards up to speed. So that's a little bit of the timing and the history. Four main components of the Haz Com process, in my mind, that you have to work out at a site is the hazardous materials labeling, safety data sheet or SDS preparation, use, and storage, non-routine work or contractor safety, and then lastly employee training. And there are many different degrees of implementation and nuances which each company will face. But in my way of organization thinking, this is typically how I will approach each company's process. So we're going to, like I say, go over the labeling and SDS changes for the most part today. We're not really going to cover non-routine work or contractor safety. That's more in a full Haz Com training program. But we are going to touch on employee training towards the end of the presentation. So I guess I need to maybe put this little over here a little so I can see if there are questions. I guess, Kat, if you wanted to pipe in if there was a question, or I guess I'll be watching the bottom of my screen to see if anything pops up. We will try to address questions towards the end of the session, but the other thing is that there may be questions which I will not have an immediate answer to, and as such, I think what we'll do is get that answer for someone and then get back to them. Versus,
okay, that sounds perfect.
And there are a lot of little permutations in this regulation. So as I disclaimed before, I am, while I am very experienced and knowledgeable in this subject, I am certainly not the czar of hazard communication. So.
Yes, definitely feel free to ask any questions that you have on the GoToMeeting chat feature, and then if Philip is not able to answer the question, we can parking lot that and get that answer to you after the fact. Nathan, you said you had some problem hearing. I hope you're able to hear okay. Now we have started the webinar, and hopefully you've resolved your audio issues.
Okay. All right. So I am going to just put this aside a little bit, and then go ahead and continue. All right. So with hazard communication, we're going to talk about labeling first, and one of the preambles to labeling, in my mind, is discerning which type of container type you have, because there are different types of labeling requirements based on the type of container you have. So there are four basic types that I've kind of identified. One is a shipping container, and that's something that's going out over the road or land, sea. We'll talk about that in a minute. Workplace containers, those are inside the workplace exclusively. And then there's a container which is kind of, in Haz Com specifically, which is kind of a solid, which is not really an article type of container. And it just requires a different type of labeling. It has a small exemption to it versus other types of containers. And then lastly, there's temporary containers, and those are temporary portable containers. Okay, shipping containers, and Kat, is this blocking anybody's view, the actual GoToMeeting?
No, everyone is able to minimize that on their own screen, so
I see.
You're good to go. You're fine.
Right. Thank you. So the first type of containers are shipping containers, right? They're moved in or out of facilities through the road, air, rail, or sea. There's a DOT placard symbol that's going to take precedence on packaging, and as you can see, this is a specific package right here, and you can see an actual a DOT placard label on there, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. Containers must be undamaged and properly marked for use. Right? This container obviously is in great condition. And then they must be selected properly for container compatibility, durability, and safety. So shipping containers are any container that are going to go out of that facility, whether it's over the road, air, rail, or sea. Markings, and the slide you're seeing right now is one of the interactive slides that I have in the training program on Coggno. But this slide will explain a lot of the DOT marking descriptions. As you can see with the red circle here, there's a UN marking. The United Nations has standards for all types of packaging that are shipped throughout the world, and those symbols that you have here need to be matched up with the type of material that is being shipped. So as you can kind of see over to the side here, it has a United Nations coding system. It tells you whether it's a drum or a pail, what type of construction, is there whether it's closed head or open head, what kind of packing group it is. And just to give you a little background on packing groups, the DOT classifies chemicals just like the GHS does, and according to hazard, based on whatever type of physical or health hazard they offer, and they also have to provide packaging that can stand up to the standards that they set, which is it's typically a drop test. And then there's density of the material packed. There's all kinds of pressure ratings, and then there's more information about where it was made and how it was made and the date and that type of thing. But shipping labels, or excuse me, shipping containers will always have these types of markings, or shall I say, they should have these type of markings on them so that they can go out over the road. All right. And here's another further examples of shipping containers. Cylinders, you can see they always have different numbers and embossed or imprinted on the actual cylinder itself. Bigger, larger totes will have them stuck to the bottoms or the sides or painted. So, although these can be workplace containers, they are shipping containers when they are actually shipped out, and the reason they are is because they're legally allowed to be. Okay. So, next up, workplace containers. And these are, some typical pictures of workplace containers, things that aren't specifically allowed to go out over the road. So I just showed you shipping containers that are able to be shipped out over the road because of their DOT or UN markings. These containers typically are not UN rated, and they are assigned specifically to the workplace, and they stay in the workplace. Right. Next, what about piping systems? This is a specific exemption that the Haz Com standard addresses, and that says that piping systems are not considered containers for this Haz Com standard. Now, though many piping systems in factories do contain the information or some basic information about the hazards of the material in them, and it's actually best practice. It is not required under the Haz Com standard. In other words, they won't have to have all the labeling elements that a normal container would have. All right. So all types of workplace containers and an exemption here. Okay. Last one that we talked. Well, the third one we're talking about is solid material containers, right? And then you wouldn't think of these as typically as a container, but as it applies to the Haz Com standard, certain materials that are not considered an article, and we'll discuss that in a moment, things that are not considered an article and that don't have any other hazardous coatings on them can be considered solid material containers, if you will. and that basically attaches to it a specific kind of labeling exemption that OSHA allows. And so I guess let's talk about what an article is so you understand. But I showed you a couple of pictures here of a kind of generic piece of wood that could be shaped into something else or cut into pieces or further processed to make it a whatever it's going to be. And the same thing goes for a steel beam. It could could be bent and or molded, changed, or whatnot to make other different types of products. So not necessarily an article. All right. So let's look at the definition of an article. An article means a manufactured item other than a fluid or particle which is formed to a specific shape or design during manufacture, which has end-use functions dependent in whole or in part upon its shape or design during end use, and which under normal conditions of use does not release more than very small quantities of trace amounts of hazardous chemical, as determined under paragraph D of this section, and does not pose a physical hazard or health risk to employees. So it's basically a material that may have some kind of hazardous chemical in it or contained in it, but is shaped specifically to do some type of work or any other type of application. So any kind of product is exempt from the Haz Com standard, and so that when you're looking at the solid articles, and I'll go back, when you're looking at this solid material containers, it really has anything that's not an article. Okay, so is what an article is the question here, and so it depends, I guess, is the answer, right? It depends on whether it's shaped specifically to produce something, or if it is a generic material that's going to be cut and or used again, and also does it have some kind of special coating on it that might be considered hazardous. So there are very many permutations here of the answer, but generally speaking, the solids are those kind of amorphous type of materials. And then the last container type is a portable container, or a temporary portable container, and this is exempt within the Haz Com standard for labeling because of its use. And so a temporary container is something that needs to be immediately used. And this is one of those slides that I have in the interactive training module, which shows you a labeled container, workplace container that has an actual hazard communication label, and then they're filling that particular container into this portable temporary container. So they may be doing a batch or some other type of process where it immediately gets used and emptied. So the exemption here is very specific for its immediate use, and it's one of those things where if you're going to leave different types of chemicals around with the material in it, you can be cited by OSHA for that violation of Haz Com standard. So, but that's the fourth type of container. So once you know the type of container, you will know basically what type of labeling elements and how much you need to label it. So move down here. So quick questions. If is this material labeled properly? And this is something that you'd probably see at your average, manufacturing plant or car assembly place, whatever it may be, right? If you got it in your eyes, would you know what to tell the emergency medical technician what it was? So proper labeling must follow the new OSHA regulations modeled after the GHS standard. So this particular type of container we're showing you right now would be considered a workplace container, because it doesn't look like, it's not going out over the road, it's probably not approved for it, and it's in the workplace, so it would be considered a workplace container. On to labeling of those containers. Okay, the hazard communication labeling elements that are required for containers lists 6 different criteria for those containers. Simply put, this is kind of the organization that 1910-1200 has. So I'll follow through. And the first one is the product identifier. Right? The product identifier is the name of the substance, mixture, or alloy, which may be a chemical name of the substance that make it hazardous. It may be the same as the SDS. It must be the same as the SDS. Excuse me. So whatever your product identifier and your label is, it must match the name on the SDS in Section 1. Right? So a typical example would be, sodium hydroxide. And the SDS would say sodium hydroxide as the product identifier. Yeah. Hello? Okay. So the SDS would be labeled as a sodium hydroxide, and the label itself would have sodium hydroxide on the product identifier. The next category of labeling element that's required is called a signal word. All right, and let's go here. Signal words and quotes down here are used to indicate the relative level of severity of hazard, and this is based on what's called a hazard category, which is kind of beyond the scope of this discussion. So, but based on the level of hazard category, you're going to have a different signal word. All right, so there's 2 of those words. And the first one is warning, and here's a picture of something that might be a warning. We use this in the training video to show relative levels of hazard. All right. So someone who is fearful or maybe cautious about something is a warning level. And then the other level of signal word is a danger. All right. And danger is really there to show more of an extreme hazard, something that's an imminent hazard to one of the workers. And obviously the labels won't have the pictures of the person on them, but they will have the wording, warning or danger. Okay? And obviously this person shows a lot more concern or a lot more level of hazard or degree of danger. So warning and danger are the 2 signal words. The third element we're going to go to is what's called a hazard statement. So it's a phrase assigned to the hazard class and category, which describes the nature of the hazards of the material. So the hazard statement's going to further clarify what the hazard is, right? So it's a phrase which describes the nature of the hazards of a product, and in some cases the degree. Right? Examples would be, this is a pyrophoric solid, so that would be, hazard statement might be catches fire spontaneously if exposed to air. Now these are all specified in the GHS or in the the hazard communication standards, so that they are associated with the right hazard class. Another example might be an oxidizing gas, right? May cause or intensify fire, oxidizer. So it's the hazard statements kind of bring together the or further clarify the signal words. Okay. Next up is pictograms, and I think this is the one that everybody recognizes most frequently, right? It's a graphical composition that may include a symbol plus other graphical elements such as a border, background, or pattern that is intended to convey specific information, and they all have red colored borders in the Haz Com standard. Right? It's easily recognizable, standardized, always have a red border, and they're not a DOT placard. And that's important distinction because of the fact that there are cases when the DOT placard symbol will take precedence over a Haz Com symbol. So when there is shipping to be done, whether it's out on land, sea, or air, or whatever it is, the UN, or excuse me, the DOT, at least in the United States, UN symbols will be required on the packaging versus the Haz Com pictogram. And the only main difference is that the typically the borders, the colors are colored in a DOT placard. It has a name and a hazard class, which the GHS or the Haz Com labels don't. Again, these ones will take precedence if there's a shipping label. Okay. But to go through some of the hazard classes, right? This is a flammability. You know, you're talking about you know, could be gasoline or any other type of flammable liquid. It also includes things like flammable aerosols. So very easily recognizable, easy to distinguish what the hazard is there. This next one is not so readily, I guess, identifiable because it does have the flames as well, but it does have the big circle 0 in there to identify an oxidizer, and those are things, you know, like a sodium, like a hypochlorite solid, or maybe a really strong nitrate solid, like a, you know, fertilizer type of thing. They may be oxidizers. Okay, and those things will lend themselves to creating a fire. All right. This one is obviously very easily definable. It is an explosive bomb, and it you know, denotes any kind of type of explosive, and also I believe like certain types of strong organic peroxides which have kind of a what's called an SADT, which is a self-accelerating decomposition temperature. So fairly recognizable, and certainly something that would cause someone to pause, right? And this is a traditional corrosion symbol. Everybody knows what this means, I think. These are regular chemicals or solids that will corrode material skin. Gas cylinders is exactly that. It's a picture of a gas cylinder, so fairly recognizable. Shows the employee that there is a pressure hazard there, whether it be toxic, additionally toxic, or it be you know, something that's flammable or whatnot. Then there might be additional GHS or Haz Com symbols, but at least this will show you that there's something under pressure. Next one is traditional skull and crossbones, and that stands for you know, severe or acute toxicity. It is something that obviously is a higher level toxicity hazard that immediately is going to cause danger to someone's life. Okay, next one is health hazards, and it's really kind of one of the ambiguous ones. Usually, all of the other symbols are very definitive. The exclamation point is really for some of those hazards that don't quite get to toxicity or a corrosion or sensitization, those type of things that may fall in the cracks, that may be a little slightly lower of a hazard. And as you can see, I got some wording down below that covers some of those categories, right? So low skin corrosion, irritation, eye irritation, and there are a lot of chemicals that may fall into this. What it will, you know, typically do is hopefully cause the employee to take a look at some of the further you know, defining information on the label that will tell them what kind of hazard they're facing. So next up, health hazard, and I think everybody kind of gets the sense of some of these. These are typically your carcinogenic materials or respiratory sensitizers, I believe. And the whole goal here is to show that there's a real health hazard with the materials that may be contained in a package. Last one here, and this is the 9th one, but it's actually technically not part of the Haz Com system. However, you may see this. It is optional. It is a fish or, you know, kind of a dead tree, and that is an environment symbol, which is, you know, kind of indicative to that the material is really harmful to the environment or to fish or whatever it may be. So Obviously, you may see that. Some people may, they may need to know what it is just if they see it, but it is definitely, it's not a required element of Haz Com law because it really has to do with things that are done by the Environmental Protection Agency. So anyway, those are the 9 or well 8 required and 1 not required pictograms. So that brings us to our 5th category, precautionary statements. And precautionary statements are basically wording that further describes what to do. And I'll get here. It says it's a phrase that describes recommended measures which should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse or effects resulting from exposure or to improper storage, handling of a hazardous product. So the 4 categories that are out there are prevention, right? So it's really about how you want to prevent causing issues with the material. So if it's a flammable, it might be keep away from ignition sources such as heat or sparks or flames or no smoking. So prevention kind of tells you how to avoid issues. The response is, things like, in case of fire, use for extinguishing appropriate media specified by the manufacturer, or on skin, remove or take off clothing immediately and wash in the shower. So there's all kinds of response things for people who may come in contact with this. The storage precautionary statements tell typically about humidity and or temperature or things that the material should be stored in to prevent either releases or other types of reactions. And then lastly is disposal. And so the disposal precautionary statement typically is a blanket statement on most labeling elements because of the fact that the requirements for disposal are highly variable and typically are covered by the Environmental Protection Agency as well. So they're not really part of the requirements for the Haz Com standard. So, but it is required to have this as one of the 4 categories on the precautionary statements. So it's prevention, response, storage, and disposal that you're going to get to. Okay. Okay. So precautionary statement design, right? These are how you will see precautionary statements on the labeling. There's a main statement that's in bold print. So, like I talked about prevention, it might say ground and bond container during, receiving and transfer of liquid. So the ground or bond container might be in bold print for flammable, that is. All right. If there's a slash in a statement, that means you have a choice of the items, either or. All right. And if there's a dot, 3 dots in a statement, that means not all conditions are listed. That means you need to seek more information on the SDS. Anything in italics, all right, in a statement further qualifies specific conditions. Okay. So if we talked about that grounding and bonding, you'd say if electrostatically sensitive material is for reloading. So in other words, it further qualifies the grounding and bonding statement. And then lastly, in brackets is a statement that applies if the bracketed statement applies. And so you have to discern whether or not that's particularly true, depending on the case that you're working on. So, okay. So those are your precautionary statements. So we went through the first 5. Obviously there's a lot more here than what people are used to in hazard communication, and I think we're starting to see some of those labels. So we're going to kind of wrap this all up in a second, but you'll kind of see where we're at. And the last section is for shipping labels only, is to have the company name, address, and telephone of the chemical manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party on the actual label. So the final product might look like this, right? And in this particular label, you've got their name, address, and telephone listed down here in section 6, in Section 5, you've got the precautionary statements, right? Section 4 is actually the hazard statements, right? These are the ones that we talked about earlier. Section 3 is your signal word, and 2 is your pictograms, and then obviously the first one is your product identifier. Okay, so this might be an example of a label. Obviously, a heck of a lot of information here, so I think that's definitely a good thing. Also, maybe indicative of why the training really needs to happen, because people really need to know what these different things mean. Okay. Alternate labeling. So we just went over regular, traditional labeling for shipping containers and chemicals that are coming into your facility. And then for workplace containers that we talked about, you do have to have labels either on them or somehow either affixed and or associated with the specific package or product that's in your workplace. And they also allow what's called alternate labeling, right? And this particular slide shows a NFPA 704 diamond, which is really preferred by fire departments across the country for larger vessels and or tanks, etc., that might be on site. What the Haz Com standard calls for workplace labels is that they allow you to use these alternative workplace labeling, and it says that it must, and this is a quote right from 1910-1200, it says product identifier and words, pictures, symbols, or a combination thereof which provide at least general information regarding to the hazards of the chemicals, and which, in conjunction with the other information immediately available to employees under Haz Com program, will provide employees with the specific information regarding the physical or health hazards of a chemical. So the workplace labels themselves don't have to be like the shipping label that we just saw a minute ago. In fact, let me see if I can get back. They don't have to be like this. They can be like this as long as there's a readily available SDS in the area, or maybe some kind of process ticket that further classifies everything. So they do, they certainly do give you flexibility to do that, but the company has to decide what's best for them, I guess is what I would say. So the Haz Com standard is very prescriptive in some regards, but also leaves it open to different companies to kind of tailor it to the way that it works best for them. Okay, so that's alternate labeling. Let's go a little bit to the SDS categories, and so now MSDS of old, right? We used to have in the first reiteration of the Haz Com, we had, I think, 8 sections, right? So a lot of these sections still apply to this. This was further embellished. I believe there's an ANSI standard in regards to exactly how you do SDS. And there's GHS specifications, and so the Haz Com or the GHS SDS for the Haz Com standard has 16 sections that you see here on the right-hand column, but you see the last 5 in blue color versus the first 11, and the reason that the last 5 are in blue is because of the fact that they are not regulatorily required by OSHA. Ecological data is something that the EPA might consider regulating, right? Disposal considerations, same thing, right? EPA, some DOT type information right here, and transportation. Regulatory information could range from other environmental or health and safety regulations to European standard information or Canadian standard information. And then lastly, you may have other information like revision numbers or dates of preparation, or where the MSDS, where the SDS you can get information about the details of the chemical or use. So these last 5 sections are not legally required. If you go through the legally required ones, you see that they're very much the same, right? Hazard identification, composition, first aid measures, firefighting, accidental release, storage, right? Exposure control, physical, chemical properties, stability, reactivity, toxicological data. And so we could spend probably a good hour or two just on going through all of these, and I wanted to show the overview of it to everyone. But unfortunately, you know, there's so much information on each one of these categories that the only thing we can actually do for today is give or provide an overview. All right. So now we get to training requirements, and like I said, for everybody in the United States, hazard communication training requirements have always been in place since those dates that we showed earlier. It's just a matter of the frequency of the training and the content of the training that needs to kind of change or be adjusted. And these new labeling requirements and these new SDS requirements are an absolute must for all employees. And then you've got to take those requirements and actually dovetail those requirements into what you do at your site, which is really the site-specific stuff that you need to get to. So as far as frequency of training, right, initially before working in the facility that uses or exposes an employee to some type of hazardous chemical. Every time the hazard communication process or program changes, you need to train people, right? So if you used to have your SDSs in the office, but now they're on the M drive or whatever drive it might be, you need to train employees that here's how you can get the MSDSs now, and here's the listing. You can go right on one of these localized computers to do it. And if there's maybe a power outage or something, you can still get the hard copy here. So that's a process or a program change, or maybe they change the way that they buy new hazardous chemicals, right? So when hazardous material exposure changes, that's obviously important. If an employee moves from maybe one department to another, most places I know will cover all hazards for all departments so that employees understand what they're being exposed to. But there may be so much material that they may specify Haz Com training per department or per area. So if your exposure changes, though, or say a new chemical is bought and it changes, you kind of have to update the Haz Com training for that. Okay. If the physical, for the content, you need to go over physical and health hazards as chemical. You know how to detect exposure and recognize the warning properties of exposure, right? And then know how the employee can protect themselves from exposure in the workplace. So if you're covering the frequency and the content of these things, which again are highly variable, you are doing what you're supposed to do for Haz Com training. Okay. So some of the site-specific training elements, and I think we've touched on site specificity quite a bit, is that roles, locations, and management of SDS and listings, site-specific hazardous materials and locations, workplace labeling and other labeling types, working process for new materials, right, new chemicals, contractors or site workers, non-traditional work, Haz Com training, and then in some cases creation of SDSs or how they manage SDS creation is another part of the Haz Com. So there's a tremendous amount of different topics, and I just bulleted some of the main ones for you, and I know that there are certainly a few others that could be included depending on the company that you might be working with. So one of the great things that the training module is for is to kind of highlight the fact that some of this type of training is actually great to be done via like an interactive training module, which is what Coggno has and what Coggno offers, and Kat was detailing earlier. And some of it can actually be customized to your company, which is very, very valuable to you because of a lot of little, I guess, details that live training or other PowerPoint training like we're going over today might not have the same abilities. So some of the benefits of interactive training I can think of, and you know, Kat, I'm sure, can pipe in at the end, or we can have question and answers, is that it's easy. It has easy access. You can get on your computer. You can go ahead and sign in and do it. It's repeatable. It's a consistent message. You're getting the same presentation or material to people, and the difference, it's different because everybody interacts with it differently, and there are several variables and choices to go through which make it kind of game-like in some cases. There's confirmatory quizzing. There's printable, specific certificate for record keeping. It's a moderate cost, and the real key for return on investment is that it offers such a minimal operations interruption. You can have people one by one train. You can make sure that you know, you don't have to shut down that shipping department because everybody's going to training. You can do one by one, and it also frees up your supervisors and managers not to not have to repeat themselves several times about training. For those companies, especially that don't have dedicated health, safety, and environmental people, it's a really great idea. And lastly, site-specific modules can be cost-effectively done. We have modules that we're working on now with Haz Com that basically can be tailored to a specific site, and once you have that, you know, you can adjust it if you need to, but as far as activating it, depending on your turnover of employees, it's there for you all the time. So I guess with that, I'll show you what a typical certificate of achievement would look like for Haz Com labeling. And I think we can pass it over to Kat and/or any questions that we have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Phil. I do have a couple questions that have come into the chat feature that I'm not sure if you can see, but I'll read those out loud. But if anyone else has any other questions that you wanted to present to Phil before we conclude today's webinar, you can do so by entering that on the chat feature on your GoToMeeting panel. So Phil, I have a question here that says, do I need to relabel piping systems with the new Haz Com labeling system?
Yes. Yeah. So I think I covered some of that in the middle, towards the middle of the presentation regarding workplace containers, because there's been many people over the course of the last couple of years asking regarding that, because they do have hazard communication labeling in that it might say, you know, ammonia or you know, fuel oil line or whatever it is, and it might even have, you know, gas, you know, nitrogen or whatever in it, and they do, some of them do go by the ANSI standards on pipe marking or facility marking for safety, but they don't really rise to the hazard communication level. For OSHA's sake, OSHA has basically said a process or a piping system within a facility is not considered a container and therefore does not fall under hazard communication. Okay.
Okay, great. I have another question that says, does the Haz Com standard have a pictogram or hazard class for combustible dusts?
Oh, okay. All right. Combustible dusts. Yes. All right. So, long and short of it is, the answer is no. It does not have a combustible dust, you know, pictogram. Sometimes there may be hazards that are classified, other classified hazards that would indicate that, you know, say a combustible dust also is flammable, or it may, you know, be reactive, or it may be toxic in that there's a a skull and crossbones type pictogram. But as far as doing the and having an actual combustible dust pictogram, that is not part of the Haz Com at this point. It's not kind of classified as a hazard and not otherwise classified, or what they call an HNOC. And typically, that information might, be contained in Section 2 of the SDS. So I know they're working on different things like that, though. So I wouldn't be surprised down the road if you see more of it.
Okay, great. I have another question. As a dentist, we have very small containers, too small for a label, such as H.S.E for intraoral use, not temporary either.
Yes. Okay, so there is a specific section on smaller containers. My recollection of this interpretation of the standard is that you are allowed to add the label, physically add the label to the container. When I say that, not on the container if it's so small, but attach it to the container. I think probably the best answer, the more detailed answer I can do is follow up with that person, so I can cut and paste it. There is a specific what's the word? OSHA interpretation on small containers, and they break it down in between 2 or 3 different what's the word? Size containers by ounces, I believe. So I can get that information to them. I can't quote that off the top of my head. So.
Alrighty, sounds
but
good.
I do believe there is a small exemption to that.
Okay, thank you, Phil. David, we will get that information to you via email privately. Phil, another question I have is, where can new SDS workplace labels be purchased?
Ooh, where can they be purchased? So I don't want to recommend one service or the other, but I do know that label printing, label companies are out there in a fair, or I guess an abundant quantity. There are also labeling systems that you can, proprietary, like hardware labeling systems, which actually for a fairly moderate amount of money will actually give you the ability to print your own stickers up on site, and they actually do have different types of Haz Com standard software embedded in them, so that you can actually pull out all the information you need and put it on a label. They're tremendously handy, especially for companies that need this type of labeling, all the time. So I guess without recommending anyone, I would say, do a Microsoft or a Google search, and you will definitely find all types of labeling companies out there. Those are those site-specific details which companies have to iron out how they're going to do it in order to really comply with the Haz Com standard. So it is an important element of compliance. It's just one that a company would have to research based on what their specific needs are, because it depends on the frequency of use and the standardization of the labels. If you're shipping out 10,000 different containers each month that are all different materials, then you may need several of those labeling machines or software. And if you're shipping out one drum a month of the same thing, maybe you just order a roll of labels. So I guess it varies.
Okay, thank you. One more question is, do we have to hire another SDS company if our people don't have ecological or disposable or other regulatory information required in sections 12 to 15?
So my knowledge of that is that the sections 12 through 15 are not required. They're required to be on the SDS. In other words, the format has to be there. So you have to provide, in section, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but say, section 10, shipping, requirements, you do have to actually provide that header in the SDS itself, but you're not required on the Haz Com standard to provide that information. So, like I say, because it is regulated by other entities, technically they don't. It's kind of a type of thing like church and state, if you will. They're separate entities, and they keep them that way. So the answer would be no. You don't have to hire someone to do those for the SDS. However, there are a lot of companies that do have those as part of their SDS. So I guess to say, while they are not legally required, they are probably considered best practice. And I know environmental health and safety managers certainly love to see some of that information on there for their health and safety programs.
Okay. Phil, another question is there a good website to get info on specific SDS sheets?
Oof, specific SDS sheets. There are, again, without naming companies by name, there are several, or at least the 3 or 4 companies that I know of that offer SDS, storage and or management system type programs. In other words, they will obtain all the up-to-date SDSs and keep them in a list and give you access to them. So it's kind of an a la carte service that someone might buy, which is used by some companies. It depends. Again, each company's case is separate. So it depends on how many SDSs you have on hand and that type of thing. Does that answer the question? I'm trying to remember exactly if I might have meandered there a little.
Okay, Michael, if you need any further clarification, just let me know on the chat panel, and I can address that with Phil.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
All right. So as of now, that concludes all of the questions on the chat feature.
Awesome.
Did you want to say anything in closing before we conclude today's webinar?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that if I was to leave anybody with an impression here, I would say I've seen a lot of companies in the last couple of years that may not have even done just the required labeling and SDS training. So the Coggno site and the course that we have to offer is a great way to get into compliance with that part of it. And I know that because the 2016 deadline is coming up, I know that a lot of companies are going to be working on these standards this year. So I would encourage them to either go to their local professional if they don't already have one, or to go to H.S.E partneringsolutions.com to inquire how we can help them. Like I said, the customizable training solutions that we're working on now are a great solution for a lot of companies. So I would encourage them to take a look into that. And then, like I say, hazard communication is a great baseline training subject to cover because it greatly affects personal protective equipment, different types of processing operations. It really is kind of at the root of knowing what you're working with before you can be safe and do good health and safety. So I would say good luck to everyone this year, and I hope we all move forward.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil. Well, I do want to say that the course that is associated with today's webinar is available in its entirety. Today was just a very abbreviated portion of the course. And we do have it in its entirety on our marketplace. In addition to that, also from Phil, we have the controlled substances and alcohol testing for safety-sensitive functions available. So I will be emailing everyone information about the courses along with a 30% discount later today that you can use for yourself, or feel free to share it with your colleagues who were not able to attend today's event. Also, if you have any specific training need, you can email me directly with that topic and I can help to provide some recommendations and solutions. You can email it to me at info@coggno.com. So I do want to thank everyone again for attending today's webinar, and Phil, thank you so much for hosting today's very informative webinar. So be sure to look out for the email with the discount and the recommended courses for Phil, and I'll be sending that later today. Email me with anything that you might need I can help you with. I'm always happy to help at info@coggno.com. I hope to see you all at a future Coggno webinar event. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Kat.